Could this be the best handheld emulator? Let's find out.
We shall see.
On the surface, the RG35XX Plus might mirror its predecessor's looks, but the magic happens in the subtle tweaks.
Nice.
It's trimmed down ever so slightly, making it even more pocket-friendly. But the real game changer comes in the form of those angled shoulder buttons, now easier to distinguish by touch alone. A nod to the community mods that inspired this update. The start and select buttons have also decided to relocate ever so slightly for reasons known only to them. Aesthetic-wise, it's a familiar face with a few new expressions.
You look familiar.
By the way, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this one every single day. The heart of the RG35XX Plus has had a serious upgrade. We are talking a beefier CPU-GPU duo and RAM that's quadrupled, setting the stage for this device to tackle everything from the nostalgic charm of Game Boy classics to the demanding N64, DS, and PSP titles. And all this for a mere $14 bump in price. It's kind of hard to believe considering that the RG353VS, which has a somewhat similar design, costs 100 buckaroos.
That's expensive.
With all those features under the hood, how does this handheld actually perform? Well, like its predecessor, it tackles GBA or NES classics up to PS1 pretty well, with little to no hiccups. Of course, there will be stability improvements with harder to run titles, such as those from PS1. But are the new features actually worth it? Well, N64, PSP, and Dreamcast emulation are like walking on a tightrope. Thrilling, but with the risk of falling into the pit of performance hiccups. And since this doesn't have analog sticks, emulating those three platforms mentioned can be tricky. I'd consider it a bonus feature. So if you're looking for quality N64, PSP, or Dreamcast emulation, I suggest you look at something else.
Okay.
It's not all bad though, since one of the new features of this device is Nintendo DS emulation, and it works pretty well. But it's also not perfect, since you have to remember that the screen on this emulator is just a small 3.5-inch 4:3 ratio non-touchscreen display. So anything that needs touch won't work, and you can't remap some of the buttons for the touchscreen as well. You can either view both displays at all times, although it, being a small 4:3 display, will be tricky, but luckily, pressing R2 will show the top screen in full screen mode, which works well since most DS games only use the top screen anyway. Now, the library of the RG35XX Plus is like opening a treasure chest. It has a ton of games pre-installed. Whether you use those games or not is up to you, since you can throw in your own games through the micro SD card slot. The process is pretty straightforward as copying and pasting. Just remember to get your games legally and don't pirate it from some random ass website. But here's the catch. The micro SD card that comes with these handhelds are usually pretty bad, so either copy the OS and everything to a better SD card or just handle it with good old care and patience. One of the crown jewels of the original RG35XX was its community-driven custom firmware, turning a great device into an extraordinary one. The Plus Edition, however, looks like it's not getting custom firmware from Black Seraph or anyone anytime soon. Don't get me wrong, the stock firmware does the job, but the absence of custom options means there's untapped potential just waiting to be unlocked. The custom firmware added features like a standby mode, a better emulator backend, and the option to put custom themes as I did on my old RG35XX. If you don't believe how good the custom firmware for the RG35XX was, it was so good, even Anbernic shipped the RG35XX with custom firmware already installed. And no, they didn't make it, a guy or a team named Black Seraph did all that, and you can get it for free. For only $85, you can get the RG35XX Plus from Amazon right now. Of course, the links are also in the description box below, and here's what I think. The Anbernic RG35XX Plus is undoubtedly a leap forward, but is it worth getting? Well, let's not forget the original RG35XX. That device remains a formidable contender in retro gaming emulation, especially considering its fully realized potential with its custom firmware, Garlic OS. And while the RG35XX Plus technically adds something to the mix, in reality it doesn't add much to the overall experience. In the end, the choice between RG35XX and RG35XX Plus might come down to what you value more: the reliability and community support of the original, or the untapped potential and broader game library of the Plus. But if you ask me, it's hard to recommend the Plus without the custom firmware, and I think it's still much more worth it to get the standard RG35XX just for the better experience that the custom firmware gives. But hey, if there's a custom firmware in the future, I'll make sure to update this video's description to let you know. This has been Marty, and I'll see you tomorrow.